Ah, no, yeah, it's under the 3 points. Unter weiteres, genau, mehr. There the Q&A appears. And I think actually the participants are not able to use the normal.
French language is available for this meeting. If you would like French simultaneous translation, please press the interpretation icon shaped like a globe at the bottom of your screen to select your preferred language. And thirdly, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please type your questions in the Q&A function, and we will try our very best to solve them. Further, to make this dialogue accessible for all of our participants today, captions are enabled. You can switch them on and off in the Zoom settings below, usually in the sub-menu on your right side. For me, it's show captions. And lastly, if you would like to pose questions to our speakers or share your comments later on in the Q&A session, please use the Q&A function, and also please state your name and affiliation along with your question and comment. Thank you. But before we start, let us now share a moment of silence to reflect, meditate, or pray, each in our own way. A moment of silence, please. Thank you. Welcome once again to the launch of the report of the African Dialogues on Faith and Demography. I still remember when we started with the first dialogue in April 22, we were all excited how the conversation would go because we had planned to provide a virtual platform, a space for exchange, a virtual place where we could learn from each other about multi-religious engagement for more gender equality, education for girls, sexual and reproductive health, and youth empowerment. All of these are key to the demographic transition taking place in Africa today. Our focus, and that was clear for us at the beginning, was on exchange of experiences and best practices with and amongst faith-based leaders, organizations, and networks. And ideally, we wanted to create the opportunity to network and get to know each other in order to establish links for future cooperation to advance the demographic transition and sustainable development. I remember that in the first dialogue, we listened very attentively to what participants had to share. What are the burning questions in religious communities? What are the topics that need further discussion? So this is how participants, right from the start, they themselves shape the themes of these dialogues. And in the sixth and last dialogue, we talked about the role of faith actors as agents of change and discussed successful strategies used by faith actors to create positive change in the areas previously discussed about in the dialogues we have addressed. For us today, this is a real special moment and the highlight, at least for me, of the year, when we finally are able to present to you the main takeaways and recommendations of a very rich discussion and a meaningful dialogue throughout this dialogue series. But let me first briefly walk you through the agenda for today before I introduce our first speakers. We would like to conclude this welcome session with introductory remarks from Maria Rosa Coutillo from UNFPA and Jimmy Obuya from Religions for Peace. Then Colette Rose from my team at the Berlin-Institut and co-author of the report will share a brief presentation of the key findings and recommendations from our brand new report. Following this presentation, we will kick off a panel discussion with 3 distinguished experts, Dr. Nkeruka Didigo, Laika Mtambo and Peter Munene, who will share their thoughts on the report and its recommendations. After the panel discussions, we will have time for a brief Q&A session. And finally, we will close with some final reflections from the Federal Foreign Office of Germany by Carsten Tiede. Now, I would like to introduce to you Maria Rosa Coutinho. She's the Chief of Private Sector and Civil Society branch at UNFPA. Thank you for joining us this morning, I have to say. Maria Rosa will start with a few introductory remarks on behalf of UNFPA. Over to you, Maria Rosa.
Katerina, thanks so much. And thank you also for pronouncing my name so well. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here this morning representing UNFPA, and really would like to thank the Berlin-Institut for Religions for Peace, the German government. I'll just make 3 points. Well, the first one is this launch comes at a very important time. Where it seems that many stars are not aligning, particularly for the SRHR agenda, for the agenda for sexual and reproductive rights, but many other stars are aligning. And I think that the effort that was taken with this report is an example of a star that can bring together many other stars in alignment. So let me say that this is a moment where we feel that the sexual and reproductive rights agenda, the role of UNFPA as the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Rights Agency, the role of our partners is important more than ever. And as we say, no matter what. I lead the office at UNFPA that builds partnerships with really a very large constituency of partners, the faith-based organizations, civil society, private sector, philanthropy. And what I see is that really now more than ever, we need meaningful ecosystems of partners that produce something that can really keep our agenda at the center. And I think, colleagues, that this report is really an example of that. I'm also very glad, and this is the second point, that this report comes as the implementation of commitments that we took together in Nairobi 5 years ago. Nairobi, the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the International Conference on Population and Development was, of course, a key moment for us and for all the sector working on sexual and reproductive rights. But it brought something different. The summit brought something different. It brought a multi-stakeholder approach, which we had not seen before, and where faith-based organizations really played a key role, participating, speaking on behalf, making commitments. And this report really is I'm not going to say the final point, but a key point in the implementation of those commitments. And I'm not saying final because we hope that a lot of consequences will come from this report. It brings together key highlights. I read it very quickly, I have to say, but I promise I'll read it more, of course. But it really brings, to me, key highlights on how faith-based organizations play a unique role in building bridges, in building common languages, and also in highlighting what is the true authentic potential of youth. And looking at how, particularly with a focus on Africa, but I think there are lessons learned that we can replicate in many other contexts, how we can support the social and economic empowerment of youth really in practice and beyond words as the agent of change. So as UNFPA, of course, we are very much committed in implementing the recommendations of the report. And of course, my team will be committed in working very closely with all of you to make sure that we give a follow-up to this report. The last point I wanted to make is This year, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the International Conference on Population and Development. And I have to say that, again, now more than ever, we are seeing as United Nations agencies how we have to be inclusive, how the role of inclusive multilateralism is important beyond words. And I think a tool, I'm not going to call it a product, but really a tool like this is something that can build an example for many other practices that can bring together different actors around the sexual and reproductive rights agenda and overall around the Sustainable Development Goals, I would say, North Star. So thanks so much again. Thank you, Katerina. Thank you, all colleagues. I don't know the names of many of you, but thank you so much. And all the best. Again, we are together in this journey of the implementation of the report now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria Rosa, for your thoughts and also how you emphasize the power of partnerships. And hopefully our report can be such a tool for building bridges and underline again the key role of faith actors in this journey of shared commitments in the future. Now I would like to hand over the mic to Jimmy Abuya. He's the Deputy Director of Programs with Religions for Peace. And he, as a member of our steering group, has been instrumental to make this dialogue series a success. Thanks again to you. Over to you, Jimmy, for your remarks.
Thank you very much. Esteemed religious leaders, distinguished speakers and participants, thank you for joining us today, and a warm welcome and greeting of peace to you all. Today, I'm sharing these brief remarks on behalf of the Secretary General of Religions for Peace International and the African Council of Religious Leaders, that is Dr. Francis Kuria, whom many of you know. Dr. Kuria could not be able to join us today, and he sends his apologies, but wishes as well in the launch of the report on the role of religious actors in population dynamics with insights from the African Dialogues on Faith and Demography. This report is a culmination of a series of 6 virtual dialogues convened over a span of almost 2 years, that is from April 2022 to December 2023, where I believe most of you also attended some of the dialogues. Religions for Peace and the African Council of Religious Leaders partnered with the United Nations Population Fund, that is UNFPA, the Berlin-Institut for Population and Development, and the German Federal Foreign Office to convene and coordinate the dialogues. The report has attempted to capture the wide range of deliberations, wisdom, and insights from faith actors and other stakeholders on this important topic of faith and demography. As the report observes that the world which is our only home, has a population of just over 8 billion people as of 2024. And this population continues to grow with a projection of 10 billion people in the 2080s. Half of the population growth between now and 2050 will take place in 6 countries, 4 of which are in Africa. That is Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. Africa therefore cannot ignore this conversation on demography, and religious leaders should be at the forefront in understanding what this means and joining conversations and engage with all concerned. Religions for Peace is therefore grateful for this partnership that complements our focus on convening multi-religious and multi-stakeholder dialogue on key and pertinent issues facing our world and humanity. For more than 50 years, and as the world's largest and most representative multi-religious movement, Religions for Peace continues in its mission of advancing common action among the world's religious communities for peace, for all people, and for our planet. In the 6 dialogues held in this series, we mobilized the participation of religious leaders from our network of over 30 national interreligious councils in Africa, which form part of our global network of interreligious councils present in nearly 100 countries in 6 regions of the world, along with the women of faith and youth networks at the local, national, regional, and international levels. Through the African Dialogues on Religion and Demography, we mobilize the voice, agency, and platforms of ethnic, traditional, and religious leaders, institutions, and communities together to dialogue with technical experts in population and demography, scientists and researchers, particularly reflecting on the role religious leaders can do and play in influencing the conversations and policies around population dynamics. These include conversations around girls' education, advancing gender equity, improving sexual and reproductive health, young people's needs and opportunities, and strategies that faith actors can use as change agents in this sector. The 6 dialogues have indeed reinforced and reaffirmed our long-standing belief and conviction that the spiritual, moral, social, and institutional assets of faith, when mobilized and deployed, can be a great catalyst in advancing common action for shared well-being and flourishing. Through the use of faith teachings, values, and practices, we have seen examples of religious leaders laying the foundation needed to encourage dialogue on topics around population dynamics that may be considered sensitive, taboo, or even controversial on face value. The report being launched today is therefore an important resource, and Religions for Peace is keen on nurturing partnerships that produce and make available knowledge products that equip both religious leaders and stakeholders in understanding the dynamics facing our world today, demography and population dynamics being a key part of the dynamics the world is facing. Our faith communities and commitments remind us daily that hope is an act of courage and commitment. Despite overwhelming challenges, we must approach the conversations around population dynamics with hope and a deep sense of shared responsibility. Building a sustainable world for all means committing to concrete actions and holding ourselves accountable to them as listed in the recommendations from the report being launched today. Again, on behalf of our Secretary General, I thank you all for joining us and also our partners for working with us in this journey and leaving us with a tangible knowledge asset that will definitely be a great resource in advancing dialogue and action. Thank you very much and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for sharing with us the reflections on behalf of Religions for Peace. And now it's really high time to dive deeper into the report. Colette Rose, project coordinator at the Berlin-Institut and co-author of the report, will share with us now the main insights and recommendations of the dialogue series. Over to you, Colette.
Thank you, Katerina. Let me just share my screen. One moment, please. All right. Could you confirm that you can see the presentation? Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thank you to the introductory speakers and to Katerina. I have been the Berlin-Institut's project coordinator for this dialogue series since its beginning in 2022. And as the introductory speakers already mentioned, we convened a total of 6 dialogues over 2 years. Each dialogue brought together between 60 and 100 African faith actors and other stakeholders to explore how multi-religious engagement can contribute to demographic change and sustainable development. Each dialogue resulted in a rich exchange of ideas, experiences, and good practices. Based on these discussions, we produced a report bringing together key insights from the series, and I will now share a summary of our findings. In this presentation, I will first share with you why we convened this dialogue series specifically with a focus on faith actors in Africa. Second, I will share some key learnings from 4 dialogues that focused on issues related to demographic change. Third, I will highlight some of the challenges that faith actors and organizations can face when working on demographic issues. And finally, I will end by sharing some of the key recommendations coming out of the dialogues. Africa will experience major demographic changes throughout the century that require targeted policy responses across the continent. While populations in many world regions are rapidly aging, stagnating, or even shrinking, the population in most African countries is still overwhelmingly young and growing. Today, the African continent is home to roughly 1.5 billion people, and by 2050, this number is expected to reach 2.5 billion. Even as the population overall will continue to grow, the average number of children per woman is falling from an average of 4 children per woman today to an expected 2 per woman by the end of this century. This projected population growth, alongside a trend towards smaller families, presents African countries with significant opportunities. An increasing number of people coupled with declining fertility rates, presents the opportunity of a growing young workforce that can help bring about a boost in economic productivity. At the same time, the continent's rapid population growth alone is making it difficult for many governments to provide their people with adequate schools, hospitals, food, clean water, and jobs. While these challenges can present a grim picture, there are well-established policies and interventions to address demographic change. Faith actors should be considered key partners in these efforts, but so far have been insufficiently engaged. With that, let me speak a bit more about faith actors as agents for change. Most people in Africa identify with a religion, and in many countries, religious leaders are respected figures who enjoy greater trust than the state. This graphic shows that in 30 out of 34 surveyed African countries, more than half of the population has some or a lot of trust in religious leaders. In addition, many faith-based organizations are already engaged in areas that are crucial for demographic development, including as service providers in healthcare, education, and humanitarian assistance. Given the respect and influence that many faith leaders garner in their communities, as well as religious organizations' role in providing social services, faith actors are in a position to be powerful allies in tackling demographic challenges. With that, let me turn to some of the key insights from the dialogues. The second dialogue in the series focused on gender equality, and we found that many religious leaders and organizations are promoting gender equality in various ways, including by opposing harmful practices in their communities, such as female genital mutilation, gender-based violence, and child marriage. Faith actors do this by shifting social norms and perspectives. They can also bring men to the table and engage them in conversations about gender equality. With our next dialogue, we found that many faith actors are using religious teachings to correct misconceptions about sexual and reproductive health. For example, we heard from religious leaders who are disseminating faith-based rationales for family planning and birth spacing that is grounded in close readings and interpretations of religious texts such as the Bible or Quran. Our fourth dialogue turned to the issue of girls' education. This is a major entry point for faith actors because religious organizations are often engaged as service providers in education. For example, faith actors operating schools can ensure that students have access to clean water, adequate sanitation facilities, and menstrual products, so girls don't have to miss class when they have their period. Finally, our fifth dialogue focused on youth empowerment. We heard from young people of faith that religious institutions can help amplify young people's voices, by inviting them to assume leadership positions. In addition, faith-based organizations can make a commitment to train and hire marginalized youth, including young people with disabilities. To highlight the transformative work that faith actors are doing across Africa, each of our dialogues highlighted several projects that can be replicated in other contexts. Next, I will share 4 examples of what such engagement can look like. During our second dialogue, participants learned about a faith-based approach to transform masculinities to end sexual and gender-based violence, which has been developed by Tear Fund, an international faith-based Christian NGO. In its program, Transforming Masculinities, it engages with men and boys within faith communities to challenge and transform harmful gender norms and behaviors. Using approaches such as community dialogues, facilitators promote positive masculinities and gender equality, including through scriptural reflections. The program and its tools have been implemented and adapted to specific country contexts worldwide, including in many African countries. In a later dialogue, we heard about the League of Women Preachers in Chad, a group of female Muslim teachers that is educating women and girls about birth spacing, contraception, and menstrual hygiene in a project supported by UNFPA. One successful strategy the group has employed is educating religious leaders about Islamic arguments for birth spacing which allows for planning at least 2 years between births. On the issue of improving girls' education, we heard from a non-faith organization, Restless Development, about the value of strategically engaging religious leaders in a project in Sierra Leone that sought to reach marginalized out-of-school girls with informal education. To ensure the project's long-term success, the project implementers strategically engaged local religious leaders through community dialogues and other outreach efforts to gain their support. These engagements proved crucial to shift attitudes among faith leaders towards appreciating the value of girls' education. As a final example, we heard from the All Africa Conference of Churches, or AACC, about the urgent need to empower young Africans as agents of change. The AACC sees the potential in Africa's youth generation to economically transform the continent. But a key barrier to unleashing this potential is the lack of young people's participation and leadership in political processes. To that end, AACC builds young people's leadership skills, fosters their creativity, and creates opportunities for youth to participate in political processes. This is just a glimpse of the examples shared in the series of how faith actors engage on demographic issues. But every discussion about possibilities for engagement also included a conversation about the obstacles that faith actors can encounter in this work. So I briefly want to talk about these challenges. One of the most common issues that dialogue participants spoke about was that religious scriptures have historically been misinterpreted or misused to support harmful practices such as FGM, GBV, or child marriage. In addition, religious and cultural taboos can make it challenging to openly speak about sensitive issues. Some religious leaders want to speak out about issues related to sexuality, for example, but do not do so for fear of losing standing and respect within their community. Young people of faith can also find it difficult to connect with religious leaders in their communities, especially if they are their elders. For example, when it comes to sexual and reproductive health topics, older religious actors may resort to language of sin and condemnation, which can alienate young people. Finally, a major barrier to faith actors' engagement in the promotion of gender equality exists within secular organizations. Among secular actors working to promote gender equality issues, there can exist a generalized distrust of faith-based organizations, which can lead to the exclusion of religious leaders who could be their allies. These challenges aside, the dialogues make clear that religious actors can make crucial contributions to the demographic transition, gender equality, and sustainable development. I will now finish by sharing some of the key recommendations from the report. Looking to secular actors first, it is important that they recognize the potential of religious organizations as partners in developing and implementing health and education programs. Compared to their secular counterparts, faith actors can, for example, reach people with orthodox religious views. In addition, secular actors should support religious organizations that are already advocating for gender equality issues. They may need further funding, capacity strengthening, or other resources. Moreover, development cooperation institutions should identify appropriate language for respectfully engaging with faith actors on a long-term basis. And finally, secular actors should avoid making assumptions about religious actors' views on traditionally sensitive issues, including abortion. Asking and listening to better understand their views can lead to transformative collaboration. Next, I will share some of the recommendations for faith actors. To start, religious leaders can and should develop and disseminate interpretations of Holy Scriptures that support family planning. Turning inward, religious actors should also raise awareness within their faith spaces and institutions about the importance of girls' education, gender equality, and empowering young people. Faith actors are also in a powerful position to reach out to boys and men to challenge traditional gender roles that harm them as well. And finally, religious leaders and institutions should use their positions of influence with policymakers to support human rights-based policies. This brings me to the end of my presentation, and I hope that I have inspired you to dig further into the full report after this event. The report and a short policy brief are available in English and French on the Berlin-Institut website, where they can be downloaded for free, and we'll also share the link in the chat. Before I close, I want to acknowledge and thank the Federal Foreign Office of Germany for generously funding this project and report. And thank you for listening. Now back to you, Katharina.
Thank you so much, Colette, for this tour de force through the report, and thank you for this these insights and recommendations that we have captured there. And I know that you will stay on our virtual panel for questions and answers. Now that we move to our panel discussion with our distinguished guests. And let me first turn to Dr. Nekeruka or Kiki Didigu. She's the lead for faith, religion and culture at UNFPA. For her first question, she is our first speaker on this panel. Kiki, in the report and also, of course, in the previous dialogues, we heard about both opportunities and challenges for engaging faith actors in efforts to improve gender equality, sexual and reproductive health, and girls' education for a demographic transition in Africa. How do these findings resonate with your experience at UNFPA to engage faith actors?
Thank
Over
you
to you,
so much.
Kiki.
Thank you so much, Katharina. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. It's such a pleasure to be here. And many thanks to Colette and to our opening remarks speakers. Yes, UNFPA has a long history of engaging with faith actors, religious leaders, and institutions over many, many years. And this engagement, it has waxed and waned over the years, but it's always been really beneficial for us and for our mandate. We are the United Nations Population Fund, and so an important part of what we do is also in supporting countries achieve demographic resilience, whatever their demographic profile. And in the case of Africa, as Colette rightly pointed out, we know that there is a youth bulge, and many African countries indeed are either in the demographic transition window or at the cusp of a demographic transition. So these critical investments in health and education in the areas that are captured in the dialogues, be it girls' education, access to SRH services, gender equality, these are the critical investments that need to be made, and these align exactly with the work of UNFPA. And so, you know, we see that there are immense opportunities to collaborate more closely with faith actors and to amplify the really, really important work that they are doing. Of course, there's a role for governments when it comes to policies and investments and programs to bring about a demographic transition. But what we found historically is that when it comes to shaping sociocultural norms, right, when it comes to those intimate decisions that individuals would make around family planning, around birth spacing, around even keeping girls in school, addressing issues like child marriage, there is an enormous role that faith leaders can play in guiding their communities and societies in taking these important life decisions. The role of faith leaders in shifting norms and shifting ideologies, especially toxic or harmful gender discrimination, gender-based violence, it's really unparalleled. And so we have had some success in collaborating with faith actors. Colette mentioned our program in Chad. We have many other programs around the world where we work closely with faith leaders on, be it menstrual hygiene to keep girls in school, access to family planning, youth empowerment programs. And the report only highlights the need and the opportunity to do so much more. And that's really where we see ourselves going in the near future. UNFPA is also going through some changes and some restructuring internally. And one of the things we want to do is to expand our engagement with faith actors and religious leaders. And the report is a wonderful addition to our milieu of tools, as Maria Rosa put it, that can allow us to do that more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiki, for sharing with us your thoughts and the experiences of UNFPA in this field, and also to underline the role of faith actors with regards to shifting social norms or guiding their communities in these vital spheres that you mentioned. And I will come back to you in the second round of questions on what you meant by the need to do so much more. But let me now come to our second speaker on the panel. Her name is Laika Ntambo. She's the youth representative at the Interreligious Council of Religions for Peace in Malawi. Hello, Laika, are you there? And I have a first question to you. What are your experiences? What are some of the opportunities or challenges you encounter as a faith actor working on gender equality issues? Could you maybe share a few examples with us? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Colette. If I hear you correctly, you're asking only about the challenges that I face working as a faith actor in advancement of gender equality.
You can also share the opportunities. Both are important.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I work here in Malawi in advancing gender equality, specifically through promoting girl-child education. So what I have seen is that in Malawi, at least we do have already well-established institutions that are there. Even the faith space, we have structures that whenever we have a problem, we can go and engage them. And this also offers a sustainable environment for the advancement of gender equality, especially on the promotion of education. And also they offer the space for collaboration. And apart from that, in these spaces, what I've seen is that we do have the spiritual scriptures that guide us as faith actors. For Muslims, we have the Quran, and for Christians, I know we have the Bible. And these we use as tools to also promote advancement of gender equality. And when we use these tools, when we go out there in the communities, it is easier to convince even the fathers that do not allow their girls to go to school. We just refer to the Quran and we say, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that education is for everybody, girl or boy, they all must be educated. So these are other opportunities that we have in our faith communities, and especially speaking on as a Muslim. On challenges, when we take the concept of gender equality out there, it is not well received because of these misconceptions, their attitudes that you want to maybe not even follow what religion says, because there's this misunderstanding that when we talk about the power dynamics, it is a man that has to lead. For example, they are not ready to see a woman stand in front of them and talk about these issues. So the challenge I see is that we have limited spaces in which we can advance gender equality, because the people that are there, the gatekeepers that are there, they are not ready to listen to these stories. And even within women, when you bring out issues of sexual and reproductive health, they'll begin to say, you don't have to bring those issues. You know, our religions say you have to abstain from sex. You don't have to do that. So you cannot come here and tell them that they have to use contraceptives, that they have to use these other methods. So it becomes a challenge in a sense that people do not want to acknowledge that we have these problems within us and among us. And we want to pretend that everything else is all right, whereas our children are having babies at a young age. Our children, have so many complications, birth-related, because they're giving birth to children at a very young age. So that's a challenge in attitudes. And maybe this comes from lack of awareness and also ignoring the clear scripture texts that are there to guide us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alaika, for sharing these vivid examples for the opportunities, but also of the challenges that you face in Malawi. I think this is also something that we saw also in the dialogue, the discrepancy between the realities on the ground, the problems, also teenage pregnancies that communities face, but on the other hand, the awareness and the attitudes behind all that, and how to overcome this, how to bridge this, and talk about these also sometimes taboo subjects. Thank you so much, and I will come back to you shortly. But let me now turn over to Peter Monene. He's the CEO of the Faith to Action Network. And please allow me at this point to mention and acknowledge that, Peter, with your own contribution and the active participation of your network, you have really made a big contribution to make this dialogue series as a success. Thank you so much. But let me pose a first question to you. Peter, you lead an interfaith network working globally to improve health, well-being, women's rights, and gender justice. How does the report resonate with your experiences working in all these issues in Africa and beyond?
Thank you very much, Katharina, and all the other panelists and those who are participating. Indeed, these dialogues have been an incredible opportunity for the faith community to contribute and participate in sharing their own experiences and also running on population dynamics. But coming back to Faith to Action Network, as an interfaith network, which is Southern-led, Southern-based, membership-based, there are a few things that we have run in undertaking the work that we do, and especially looking at the report and the issue around women's rights and gender justice. The report speaks very clearly about how the faith community can play a role in improving gender equality. And I want to say that the faith community has been very active in this area. It might not be very visible to others, but internally, the faith community has done a lot to improve gender equality. I will share two examples to illustrate this. The Anglican Church, for example, here in Kenya, today, as we celebrate the church's development, has actually been able now to appoint 2 female bishops. And I have to say this has been a struggle inside the church. It has been a struggle. There was actually a moratorium of 5 years that was put by the church where women could not be able to vie to become bishops. But when the moratorium came to an end in 2018, some of the male bishops very quickly went into having female bishops elected, are now serving as bishops, full bishops. So that tells you that the faith is actually promoting gender equality. The other example that I want to share is the example of Indonesia, where we have women ulamas. These are religious leaders who are Muslim, but who are also preaching, even in mosques. And this is not something, again, that is that it might be very visible to very many people, but it means a lot when you have a women preacher preaching in a mosque in a country which is predominantly Muslim. I've shared those two examples, one from Asia, one from Africa, but there's a lot that women, religious leaders have also been able, or the faith has been able to do around eradication of female genital mutilation, around addressing and the fight against gender-based violence, sexual gender-based violence, practices like harmful practices like cultural practices like wife inheritance, harmful practices, cultural practices like child marriages, among others. And this is something that cuts across religions. We have seen this in the interfaith work that we do. And we want to just recognize that it is not easy for the religious leaders who take those steps to implement such changes within their own faith institutions. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of sometimes opposition within, but then they are willing to stand and then be able to stand for the women so that they can also work and be able to advance within their own faith structures, but also within their own areas of expertise. Because many are willing to serve in those positions if given an opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. And we will come back to this, how, as you described, it takes courage to take these steps, but how can we support and encourage further that religious actors really are engaged in gender justice and women's rights. And thank you so much for sharing these examples for how religious actors are already a part of this field within their religious communities. Thank you. And let me now start the second round of question. I will come back to Kiki with the second question. Kiki, we ended up what UNFPA needs to do more to support or to work with faith actors. And the report highlights many examples of successful faith-based projects, and Colette has described them, to promote gender equality, family planning, girls' education, and youth empowerment, to name just a few. All of these are core issues for UNFPA. So looking into the future, how can this report inform your ongoing work, and how can UNFPA take forward the recommendations of this report? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katerina. That's a great question indeed. And listening to my fellow panelists, Laika and Peter, I want to commend them for the amazing work that they are leading and they are contributing to. I was listening carefully, and Peter talked about how, you know, a lot of the work that's going on may not have the visibility. And Laika also mentioned how perhaps a lack of awareness might be contributing to some of the challenges that she has encountered in her work. And I want to start there in my response. I think for us, UNFPA can help provide much needed visibility to the work of faith actors, and also create the awareness, starting with, you know, the low-hanging fruit, the dissemination of this report across our organization, across all of our offices, regional offices, representational offices, and with our partners too. Currently, UNFPA chairs the interagency task force, the UN Interagency Task Force on religion and sustainable development. We co-chair it with 2 other entities. And so, I'm already beginning to conceptualize a way to bring this report into that space and maybe have a similar event such as this so that we really can begin to take it forward and even have a plan of action for 2025. When we think about the way we can engage with and support faith actors and religious leaders in doing this really important work, there's the advocacy component of it, there's the policy bit, and there's also the programmatic. And when you think about advocacy, this happens at various levels, national, regional, but also in multilateral spaces, right? I'm thinking that it's critical to be more intentional about inviting the voices and the views of faith actors into, for instance, the upcoming CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, the Commission on Population and Development, the CPD, even the high-level political forum. For 2025, this is the forum where we review all the SDGs. And in 2025, the gender goal and the health goal will be undergoing in-depth review. Ahead of the HLPF in July of 2025, there'll be a series of expert group meetings, policy papers, and so on. It'll be critical to bring in the voices of faith actors into these processes so that they can contribute, share their experience, and help shape the discussions of these issues at the multilateral level. And this will have a trickle-down effect to regional processes and national processes. These are some of the things UNFPA can do very concretely, even all the way to the World Social Summit and the COP, the Conference of Parties on Climate Change. I'm aware that this current COP that concluded last month or so in Azerbaijan, COP29, they actually had a council of religious leaders speaking about certain issues that are relevant to what we're discussing here at the COP. And so it's my hope that for the next COP, which is happening in Brazil, we can put together a coalition of faith actors that can advocate for the role of women and young people, even in climate change, right? So there are so many opportunities. Programmatically speaking, that's another area where I see, huge potential for working more closely with faith actors. We do have current programs that are running in different parts of the world, but I think the report findings, yes, they are specific to Africa, but they can also be extrapolated to other regions, and we can scale up our work around eradication of female genital mutilation, tackling child marriage, amplifying the need for girls' education, working with these religious leaders who are close to the community. So these are some of the things that we can begin to broker with our country offices. And finally, in UNFPA, we are working on expanding civic spaces. We recognize that civic spaces are shrinking. The opportunities to have meaningful dialogue with non-state actors on issues that are germane, that are relevant to sustainable development, to health, to gender, to human rights. And so we are launching a series of conversations around expanding civic spaces. And as the lead for faith, religion, and culture, it's my intention to bring in the voices and the views of faith actors into these civic spaces in a much more intentional way. And so, there's so much to do, and I'm excited to be able to begin or amplify this work. Thank you very much, Katerina.
Thank you so much, Kiki. And I think we all can feel your excitement and thank you so much for sharing your vision, how you could use this report as a tool to spread the word throughout UNFPA, and also make sure that the voices of faith actors are brought to the multilateral tables in the future. Thank you so much. Let me now I come back to you, Laika, with my second question. You are working with young people in Malawi, and now that you've also heard the recommendations from the report, what do you think secular organizations or development cooperation institutions should do differently to better engage religious actors, leaders, or organizations? What should they do differently, in your view?
Thank you very much, Colette. Well, as someone who's working in the advancement of the promotion of education for especially Muslim women, what I'd be expecting or how they could be engaging us is for them to partner with us meaningfully, and also recognizing that we are in this faith space. We are diverse, and because we are diverse, we have unique challenges. And when we go to them, with our faith-sensitive interventions, they should be able to accommodate them. I'll give you an example. There was a time that we wanted to do awareness. This was a Muslim women's organization, and we approached some organizations here in Malawi. But when they saw a concept note and everything else, they told us that you have just focused on the Muslim girls. Therefore, we cannot do that. We want to have a holistic approach on all the girls. And my reaction was that, yeah, we are focusing on Muslim girls. This is because they have unique problems, unique challenges that require unique solutions. For example, the issue of the hijab. We cannot bring in a Christian child on the issue of the hijab. This is unique for a Muslim girl child. And because of that experience, I had to go back and reflect. So these are people that are supposed to help us. We need resources for these interventions, and then they're closing the door to us. They're saying, because you're being specific to your own unique problem, then we cannot help you. So this is where I have a problem. I think they should be able to listen to us and also consider that we have unique challenges that require unique interventions that are faith sensitive. Yeah, and secondly, we have so many organizations in the grassroots that are not well known. They are doing the work, but it's in a very unorganized way. If they could also strengthen their capacity. For example, in Malawi, we have Ngora, which has data on all organizations that are working in Malawi. If they could use data that they can get from Ngora on these faith-based organizations and also reach out to them, because we have people doing this great work, but then they are not visible because they're in the grassroots and working in very remote areas that even sometimes these development partners do not reach out to. So that would be my contribution to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leica, for this call. First of all, call for partnership, and then also for this recommendation to listen and to allow for diversity, and to make sure that the uniqueness of the target group you are working with, people you are working with, is really captured. And also for the call to strengthen capacity building. This is also a big word. Thank you so much. Let me now move again to Peter, because we promised to continue the conversation, especially about the issue that you described earlier, that it takes courage also to move the issues within the faith communities by those who want to engage in, for instance, gender equality and so on. And we also highlighted in the report that secular organizations can often be hesitant to engage with faith actors or religion in general. What do you think can be done to change this? Because I heard in earlier conversations also that actually faith actors, faith religious institutions, and especially those who want to move forward, they need the support of secular organizations. So how do we build bridges? How do we overcome this distrust that also Colette described earlier?
Thank you, Katarina, and thank you very much for the contribution that has been done by Dr. Kiki and Raika. Just to as I come back to what can be done, to mention that Faith to Action Network has planned a series of engagement with the faith community on the issue of women's rights and gender justice. And we held, out of those series of engagements, 2 global conferences, one on women's rights in Christianity, and which was in 2022. And this year in May, we did a global conference on women's rights in Islam in partnership with Muhammadiyah and another 2 ulama in Indonesia and ICEA. And this was in Indonesia. And these were just examples. And currently, we are still running a series of engagement with religious leaders and faith-based organizations across Africa on what we call faith actors for justice, with support from Bread for the World. But coming back to the issue of how we can work with the secular organizations, I'll give a few examples. One of the examples on issues that we have found to be really areas where the secular organizations have a lot of distrust on faith organizations is around sexual reproductive health and family planning. There exists a misconception in many secular organizations that the faith is opposed to any discussion, any advancement of sexual reproductive health and rights, and also the family planning. Yet, interestingly, that the faith community also, in many countries, runs between 30 and 60, sometimes to 70% of health facilities, which still provide the same services, sexual reproductive health services and family planning services. So sometimes when you look at the misconception vis-a-vis the reality on the ground, you ask yourself, where is this coming from? In terms of education, the faith community runs almost 50 to 60% of education facilities, whether it is schools, colleges, mid-range colleges, universities, where education on sexual reproductive health is provided. And the basic information about sexuality education is actually provided. But when it comes to sometimes the technical terms, and here even with UNESCO, we have had to have a lot of discussions about comprehensive sexuality education, because the curriculum has faced a lot of opposition from the faith community because of the term comprehensive sexuality education, because people within the faith community could not then reconcile themselves with what will be comprehensive to a 3-year-old child, a 4-year-old child, a 6-year-old child. And we have promoted different terminologies that would help adoption of that particular curriculum. One of it being age-appropriate technology, sexuality education, age-appropriate sexuality education. And this has received a lot of support from the faith community. Similarly, when it comes to issues around family planning, the terminology around family planning, and again also Dr. Kiki, this we have engaged a lot with UNFPA around it. The terminology of on family planning has led to a lot of then misunderstanding, sometimes even opposition, about the use of contraceptives and the adoption of that technology in planning families. And therefore, we have had to use different other languages in terms of terminology, such as child spacing, especially when you're talking about family planning within the Muslim context, healthy timing and spacing of pregnancies within many Christian communities. And these are just examples. We worked a lot with, for example, UNFPA and many civil society organizations that are not faith-based to address or to promote the sexual reproductive health bill that has been promoted at the East African Legislative Assembly. Although it has not passed, the faith community went around to develop actually theological rationales in support of the bill. both in an Islamic theological rationale in support of the bill and a Christian theological rationale. The faith community and theologians, Muslim and Christian, look at the bill and look at the Holy Scriptures and see where does the articles and clauses of the bill then contradict the Holy Scriptures. So these are some of the efforts that Faith to Action Network has been implementing, reaching out to the secular organizations to work together to advance certain causes, but again, also reaching out to other faith actors to help them understand also where the secular organizations are coming from with their own distrust sometimes on certain positions that the faith community has taken. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Peter. Also for this looking at the question from both sides, where the distrust comes from and the misconceptions, and also how to overcome with the tool of translation or using other language to bridge the gap towards religious communities to advance family planning and other sexual and reproductive health issues. Thank you so much for sharing these very practical examples. I would like now to move over to the question and answer session. But first of all, I would like to come back to Colette and draw her also into the conversation. Colette, you have worked on this project from the beginning, and you have also co-authored the report. Can you maybe share something you have learned from this project or something that really surprised you? And then we will have a look at the chat for questions. Over to you, Colette.
Thank you, Katerina. Yes, I will say I learned a lot. My background is I have a long background working on sexual and reproductive health and rights issues. But until this project, I did not work on those issues with a specific faith perspective or looking at faith and religious engagement on these topics. And as part of my coordinating the project and helping put together each of the dialogues, one of my tasks was identifying good practices, best practice case studies that we would highlight in each dialogue, case studies that would highlight how faith actors are already engaging on these various issues that I talked about. We focused on girls' education, gender equality, sexual and reproductive health. What surprised me in the most positive way was the diversity of projects and the amount of projects that we came upon. I think for every dialogue, we would find maybe in our steering committee, we would find 20, 30 projects, and then we had to make decisions. Okay, which ones do we ask? Because we don't have 5 hours in the dialogue to present all of these projects. So that was really an amazing learning experience to see how much engagement there already is. And while there are, of course, many challenges, that there's so much, I can't think of the word I want to say, but excitement already there. And I mean, I think we covered almost every continent on the country where we found great examples. So that was delightful, and I'm glad that we could put a lot of them as case studies into the report, and I hope everyone enjoys reading about them as much as I did.
Thank you so much for sharing these insights into your perspective working on this project for more than 2 years. But now let's get us started. We have around 10 minutes for some questions from the audience. And I would like to ask you once again to use the Q&A function now. If you have not done so before, and I've seen that we have already some questions. And please, if you put your question, also state your name and affiliation along with your question or comment, and maybe also to whom you want to direct your question. And I have asked Christine Neufeld from my team also to assist me a little bit to group the questions. But now I see that we have had 4 so far, and they have already been behind the scenes answered by our team. So this is really great. We have had detailed questions on where we can find where one can find some tools and tips and tricks how to translate religious scripts, or find hints at how we can use religious scripts and for our work and in these social issues. There's also been a hint that there are already some interesting formats that are there for dialogue, and when this maybe I'm just guessing, the Secretary General maybe of the United Nations can take this up. Excellent models in West Africa and Southeast Asia that can be used to further the dialogue between faith actors and other stakeholders, for instance. Yes, and please share more questions at the moment. Oh, there's another open question. From Caroline Schmidt. She compliments us on the report and asks, I'm wondering if you also engaged with monotheistic religions. I think we did. Maybe I can refer this question back to the panel. Who wants to take this question? Is there a difference between monotheistic religions and other religions? Okay, Jimmy, your hand is up.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh. Who else wants to take this question? I think
Katerina.
Yeah.
The question is whether the project engaged with monotheistic religions.
Yeah.
I mean, these are religions that recognize a single deity.
Yes, exactly.
And that's Christianity, Islam, Judaism.
Yeah.
So absolutely, yeah. A lot of the
the
answer would be yes.
Yeah. And as far as I know, Religions for Peace is also working with is in itself a multi-religious institution. And Peter, you are also you understand yourself and your network also a multi-faith based network, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Our members are from Baha'i, Buddhist, Confucius, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, African traditional religions, among others. Yes.
So a lot of religions of faith, directions is covered. I see Carsten Thiele, whom we haven't met officially, but he raised his hand. Carsten Thiele, over to you.
Thank you, Katerina. Yes, I just wanted to make clear that it wasn't the idea in the first place to engage with monotheistic religions, but the idea was to engage with religious organizations and agents as such, because we thought them to be very important interlocutors and actors when talking about demography. So we did not choose any religion or something like that. We cooperated with Religions for Peace and the interreligious councils because we thought that the interreligious idea was the most important. So we did not concentrate or focus on any religion, just to make that clear. There was, of course, there were many monotheistic religions, yes, of course, but that was not the idea in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have another question, or somebody wants to raise a question, Muhammad Lemu, to the Muslim speakers. But I don't see the question now. Maybe it comes up in a bit. But I see that Colette raised her hand. Over to you, Colette.
Yes, I can, that question has sort of disappeared, so let me repeat it so I see it. So the question from Muhammad Limo is there an organization that has a compendium by religion of detailed religious arguments that are endorsed by important religious leaders, which promote specific issues or solutions that can be shared with other religious leaders and influencers? Would sharing these make it easier to spread the word faster than training programs and conferences? Thank you. So maybe this is Peter or maybe you have something on this, or Kiki, not sure.
Anyone wants to take this question or has spontaneous an idea? But I see also that there has been in the chat itself, there has been an answer as well.
Otherwise, I can share a different question that has reached us on a different channel altogether that maybe Kiki can take. So there is a question about that is demographically focused about why Nigeria, the DRC, Ethiopia, and Tanzania especially are projected to grow so fast.
Yes, I'm happy to take the question, Colette. I was going to chime in on the other question and say, no, I do not know of a one-stop shop where all of these religious arguments have been compiled. But I think that's actually a great idea in terms of something we can work on pulling together. I particularly like the idea of leveraging social media as a means to disseminate this kind of information. So that question is giving us more ideas that we can perhaps take forward. On the question about why these 4 countries, Nigeria, DRC, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, are projected to grow so quickly, these are large countries. These are demographically significant countries, but in terms of population size. But these countries also have some of the highest total fertility rates in the world, right? So these countries, for instance, Nigeria has a fertility rate of 5.3, and that's basically the average number of children per woman on average. So in Nigeria, as of 2023, it's still about 5.3. For DRC, it's even higher at 6.1, and then for Ethiopia and Tanzania, it's about 4.1 and 4.7 respectively, which is quite high. And to put it in context, replacement fertility is a TFR of 2.1. And so when a country reaches a fertility rate of 2.1, that's the rate at which it's basically maintaining its population size, so to speak. So there's the fact that the rates are currently quite high. And this is why the kind of work that we're talking about here, talking about education, knowledge, access to SRH services and family planning is really important. But there's also the issue of population momentum, right? So even when you bring down fertility rates over time, the fact that there are X number of women already born who will have children, that will continue to increase the size of the population. And so in countries that are massive, with populations of almost 200 million in the case of Nigeria, we still expect to see significant population growth through to about 2050, even with gradual declines in TFR. On the flip side, this is why there's the opportunity of the demographic dividend, right? If we make the right investments so that that youth bulge, when that youth bulge is productively employed, you can begin to see the economic boost that will come from having such a huge number of young people productively employed in the workforce. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword, but with the right policy package and the right investments, rights-based investments, it can be transformative for these countries and for the continent.
Thank you so much, Kiki. And let me pick for our last minute, let me pick another question from the chat that is directed towards Religions for Peace. The question is from Gesu Mosisa. Is the Religions for Peace training possible for religious leaders in African Union in collaboration with the UN to address all Africa for key religious leaders? Are there any plans to work together at African Union level? Because Kiki, you also mentioned your plans, so your vision to engage religious leaders in multilateral spaces. But are there, or Jimmy, are there any plans to engage at African Union level? Maybe we can take this last question and then come to a close.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll quickly respond by saying that, yes, Religions for Peace in Africa is affiliated to is represented by the African Council of Religious Leaders, who are the focal interfaith coordinating body in Africa. And they have close relations with the African Union, and they've been working on having a liaison with the African Union. But even besides that, I think organizations like the All African Conference of Churches, which is also part of Religions for Peace, also has a liaison office with the African Union that supports that can support such kind of work. Other than that, also Religions for Peace in Africa, through the African Council of Religious Leaders, is forming national interreligious councils as a platform for dialogue, not only with religious and among religious leaders, but with other faith entities. For example, collaborations with Faith to Action Network and other many similar organizations that are interfaith in nature and promote and provide dialogue. So it can be training, it can be messaging, it can be all sorts of engagements that require specific issues in a context. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please bear with us. We cannot find answers to all the questions right now, but I am sure that our distinguished speakers are ready to answer them after the meeting, because I see now more questions are popping up, but I think we have to, in the interest of time, we have to come to a close. So I would like to thank you all for your questions, and also a big thank you to our speakers and presenters. The report, by the way, in French and English, and policy briefs for hasty readers and press materials can be found on our website. I've asked my team to share the link in the chat, and I think it's already available there. So happy reading and spread the word. And I hope that you find the report as inspiring as we do, and can use it as a tool. And I'm sure I'm still reading the incoming questions. Some of the questions that you have are also answered, because there are quite a few examples that you could refer to and maybe explore further to answer your questions. Thank you so much. And now I would like to hand over the mic to Carsten Thiele for some closing remarks. He works in the division on cross-regional issues, Africa, Latin America, and Near and Middle East. This is nearly the whole of the world, at the German Federal Foreign Office. Over to you, Carsten, for your final reflections. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katharina. Yes, it's a bit funny that I'm the last to speak here, because I always used to say during our meetings at the steering committee that you did the work, and I only provided, not my division provided only the funding a bit. But well, so this is it. This is the last virtual event of our African Dialogues on Faith and Demography. And I'd say it has been quite a journey. I really enjoyed every single dialogue of this series. And well, as I've just said, you can really imagine that it is an honor for me to give you some brief final remarks for this formal event. I think you've seen with the presentation of the final report for the African dialogues that we really have achieved much. And indeed, we have achieved much more than we were hoping for when we started this dialogue series 2 years ago. So there is no sense in resuming all the results of the dialogue. Colette has done that perfectly, and we all have heard it already. So just let me say, in finalizing this event 2 years ago, when we started the dialogue series, we thought it was a good idea to connect religious actors and faith organizations via the Interreligious Councils of Religions for Peace, and at the same time facilitate exchange about demography and foster networking between different actors and agents of religious organizations and such. And yes, I think we can say today it has proven to be a right and a good idea. And I think that is already a great success. We've seen an incredible amount of best practice examples and good ideas and initiatives, and all connected to the topics of faith and demography. And I really like to congratulate you all that you participated and worked for the dialogue series with your ideas and with your commitment. And for all that, thank you very much. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Religions for Peace and UNFPA, and of course, the Berlin-Institut for Population and Development for making this dialogue series happen. I really hope that we all together have contributed to enhancing the transparency and public recognition for the very important topic of demography. So please keep up your engagement and your commitment to it. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you very much too.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. We'll close the meeting now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.